And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of unprotected talk, borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
How is it that rock and roll from a long time ago made more sense than Cameron does today in England, Merkel does in Germany, and of course Barry from Honolulu does in America? How is it that such a small band of maniacs, power-mad, psychotic maniacs who are dancing to the tunes played for them by the people who wish to have cheap labor, get away with this without a revolution in their countries? Now, right now, if you look at the top of the Drudge Report, it's an article linked from the RT, which is the Russian newspaper, so assume it's propagandist, as is our news media. The Russians are saying that the migrant crisis is pushing Germany towards anarchy and civil war. I don't doubt it, because frankly, it's only a civil war that will save Germany from the insanity of Merkel and those who are, let us say, dictating to Merkel. There's something crazy under this picture, with this picture. Germany is on the brink of a civil war because of the number one issue of our time. It's the same issue that has catapulted Donald Trump to the head of the polls, and that is massive, uncontrolled waves of immigrants from third world hellholes into this beautiful land of ours. We have very large numbers of poor people in this country, and yet the psychotics who are running the country could care less. They're erasing our borders, decimating our language, and stepping on our culture as if it didn't exist. And they, by the way, think this will go on without any reaction from the people. They try to laugh off Trump. They try to laugh off Americans who have called for a national identity for years. I've put up with it. I've been excommunicated. I'm the Galileo of talk radio. I'm the Galileo of the media. I am the Galileo Galilei of the American media landscape. It's official. I am officially blacklisted from Fox News. I'm officially blacklisted from the media. I've had one best-selling book after another. My newest book, Government Zero, went to number 2 on the Barnes & Noble bestseller list for week number 1. And yet I'm not allowed to speak. Galileo is excommunicated. Galileo Savage is not permitted to be heard. How long do you think it will be until your voice, your opinions, however private you may be, will soon be criminal? How long do you think it will be until censorship emerges in America and sites such as the Drudge Report and others are closed down by this criminal government, and talk radio is turned off and turned into nothing but drivel and sports entertainment? How long do you think it will be if they are not stopped? You see, they're testing the waters, and they're laughing at you. Obama goes to a theater in Manhattan the other night, surrounded by a bunch of drug-infested actors, and mocks the Republican Party, says they can't even handle CNBC. How can they handle Putin and China? Well, how has he handled Putin and China? How has he handled Putin and China? They're laughing at him like the jerk he is. But let's put him aside for the minute. I want to talk about the church. I want to talk about geocentrism. I want to talk about heliocentrism. Big words, I know, but they're really simple words. But they tell us everything we need to know now about the big lie. Way back when, going back to when the church taught that the earth was the center of the universe, the center of the solar system, it was known as a geocentric position. Geo meaning earth. They taught that the earth was the center of our solar system and that all the planets in the sun revolved around the earth. That was the church's official teaching. And then science it came along, a new elementary science at that, in the Renaissance, and they learned through Galileo and others that, it was Copernicus first, by the way, argued that the sun was unmovable and the sun was the center of the solar system. And that's known as heliocentrism. Helio comes from Helios, the sun god. And we all know that they were right. We know that Copernicus was right. And we know that Galileo, who popularized the idea of a heliocentric solar system, was basically criticized and treated very badly, forced into exile as a result of it. And so the church scored a great triumph in its expulsion of him and the Jews, by the way, from Spain, Incidentally, Galileo was born Jewish but converted to Protestantism. Then he became Catholic. Then he became a Jesuit. He had to, in other words, in order to survive in his time. The church was so monstrous and so powerful that they expelled the Jews from Spain, and they forced hundreds of thousands of Jews to convert to Christianity at that time. But that was the beginning of the unraveling of the power of the church, and that was the beginning of the modern Western world. What does that have to do with what's going on today? Well, I'll tell you, it has nothing directly to do with it, but it has everything to do with truth and lies. It's the struggle of the truth versus the big lie of the power-mad psychotics who are running the West. Those who have subscribed to the theory that open borders are good for nations. The man behind all of this is none other than the most evil man in the history of the modern world, in my opinion, George Soros. George Soros has spent hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, breaking the borders of Europe. According to the president of Hungary, he is the man behind the broken borders in Europe. One man has done this damage to the nationalities of Europe. One man alone, according to the president of Hungary. George Soros, as you well know, funds many of the leftist hit groups in the United States of America. Front groups that you think are mainstream and legitimate are really not. They're Stalinist hit groups, such as Media Matters, funded by him. Groups that work for Hillary Clinton, groups that work for Obama, groups you would never believe work for him. And the message is the same. Anyone who opposes the dissolution of their own nation, the dissolution of their borders, language, and culture is a fascist, a Nazi, a racist. And many of you have been silenced by these evil people for fear of being called those names, because you don't want to be excommunicated. You don't want to be treated like Galileo was treated. And then they find a pope. And they find a pope somewhere in South America. He's not a pope at the time. A left-wing fanatic all of his life. A left-wing operative. Began as a bartender. I don't hold that against him. I would say that Pope Francis's history as a bartender is actually the stellar moment of his life. If I were to say it was the best part of his life, he was probably more honest as a bouncer than he is as a pope. At least he was true to himself, the thug that he obviously is underneath that persona of the Mr. Nice Guy, constantly meddling in the United States, constantly coming here and telling us to break our borders with Mexico, constantly telling us we're evil and mean because we don't take in more people from Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, etc. No, he was a very nice bouncer because he was more honest man. So they find this guy in South America and they elevate him all the way up. And for the first time in 1,200 years, listen to me. Hey, don't turn the dial. For the first time in 1,200 years, we have a non-European pope. How did he get to that position? And how did he suddenly become an expert on climate science when he has no training whatsoever in climatology? He knows nothing about climate except that when it rains, his aides hold an umbrella over his head. And why would the Pope push this theory of man-caused global warming, that we're dirty, filthy, rotten creatures destroying the earth? What is he after? Money. Follow the money. It's always about the money. Now let's jump cut. We're now jump cutting to the United States of America. Imagine this is a film. And I just gave you the opening scene of the film. Without any transition, we jump to the following scene. Paul Ryan, suddenly anointed Speaker of the House of Representatives after the Quisling Boehner is thrown out, forced out. They said he resigned, but he was forced out because he was turned out for what he was, a Quisling. So they find Paul Ryan, who we know is identical. And what is the first thing Paul Ryan announces today that he's going to do? He's going to push through the highway bill. What? That's the most important thing, is the highway bill, not building a wall with Mexico, not stopping the influx of millions of migrants from Africa into this country. 2 out of 3 immigrants to this country now, asylum seekers, are coming from Africa. We'll put that aside for the moment. So why is Paul Ryan pushing the highway bill? Answer. There used to be a saying that went like this: all roads lead to Rome. Now, what does it have to do with the highway bill? Who builds the roads in America? You know anybody in the highway construction business? I don't know anybody in the highway construction business. This is the greatest boondoggle since the solar scandals about to emerge. The greed, the pork barrel spending, the outright thievery that you will see emerge from the highway bill is something that you will never behold could happen in a fair society. They are raping and pillaging the United States of America as quickly as they can. And they're doing it and getting away with it without any consequences. How are they doing it and getting away with it without any consequences? Because the leader of the left-wing revolution that is now in power, Barry Obama, is the most skilled left-wing orator in modern history, maybe in all of human history. He has done more damage than Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin together. He is smarter than Marx and Lenin. When have you last seen Barry Obama lose his temper? Never. When have you seen Barry Obama jump up and scream in rage? Never. He is the most silk-smooth con man in the history of the left-wing movement, which is how he gets away with it. Now, combined with that is the very dangerous situation that there is no media. It's been nullified. That's number two, as you saw clearly with CNBC. You know their own lock, stock, and barrel. That's nothing new to me. 1998, I, Michael Savage, gave a speech before the Commonwealth Club, a very important speech that has long been forgotten. It was entitled, Beware the Government Media Complex. You wouldn't know the speech exists, but I gave it before the Commonwealth Club in 1998. It was when Bill Clinton had taken control of the press. So you have no opposition party, you have no opposition press, and then you have a dictator who's as smooth as silk, pushing an agenda that's beyond comprehension down the throats of the American people who oppose virtually every point of his agenda. Now you say, how do you know they oppose it? Okay, I'll give you a fact. We learned only last week that the EPA, the corrupt Environmental Protection Agency, spends something like, I think it was $60 million, it could be in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year, on public relations work external to their own department. Inside they have about 100 PR agents. They spend $60 million a year, $100 million a year on outside PR agencies to spread their lies about global warming and the wonderful work that they're not doing. So if the EPA is spending a couple of $100 million a year on PR, how much are they spending for boss tweet in the White House? What do you think the PR cost is for Barack Obama to get away with his lies and his subterfuge? $1 billion a year? $500 million a year? $600 million a year? $400 million a year being spent on putting out the big lie, PR agencies? We don't know. That's how he gets away with it. Virtually everything you read in the newspapers about Obama is a lie. Virtually every picture taken of him is a lie. Virtually everything about him, he may as well be the virtual president. He may as well be a fabrication. He is the Capricorn 1 of presidents. He is President Zero in a government zero. That's the opening to my show. I'll be back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
My Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust to protect my wealth with gold and silver. Call 800-BUYCO. Migrant crisis pushing Germany towards anarchy and civil war. Sliding towards civil war, says Mr. Mueller of the Alternative for Germany party. Bavarian official Peter Dreyer called German Chancellor Angela Merkel to tell her personally that if Germany welcomes 1 million refugees, mainly Syrian males of military age, his town of Landshut will only take in 1,800. Any extra refugees will be put on buses and sent to her chancellery in Berlin. That's what we should be doing with Obama. We should be sending buses to the border, putting the immigrants on buses and send them to Washington, send them to Sacramento, make the corrupt governor of California take them in to his chancellery. Under the threat of torture and later under the threat of excommunication, Galileo was forced to recant, to withdraw his statement that the world was round, that the earth revolved around the sun, and that certain other views about the laws of gravity were not true. Now, all of these scientific ideas, of course, have since been proven to be accurate. We've learned that in grade school. But those ideas were held to be heretical by the church. Did you know that? Did you know that anyone who disagreed with those ideas were considered heretics by the church? Now, what does this little lesson in heliocentrism and geocentrism and Galileo and Copernicus have to do with what's going on in the world today? Directly everything. The liars in Berlin, the liars in London, the liars in Washington are threatening us with excommunication, imprisonment, if we insist that we have a right to a national identity. If we insist that we as Americans have a right to a borders, language, and culture.